Meeting is being broadcast live to the public. The meeting will start shortly. Thank you.
I'll try not to be like the school board in the East Bay.
All right, everybody, welcome to our February 23rd City Council meeting. Madam City Clerk, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Tibbetts?
Here.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Present.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Present.
And Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Great. Thank you so much, Dina. So we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping today as just a reminder for council members to please keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking. Council members other than myself can unmute themselves and mute themselves. Staff will remain muted until needed to speak. And as members of the public join the meeting, they'll be participating as attendees today. That means that their microphones and cameras will also be muted. Only today's panelists will be viewed during the meeting and during the particular presentations that we have. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy concerns, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number to resident and then the last couple of digits of your phone number. The City of Santa Rosa is committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment free from disruption and will not tolerate any hate speech or actions, and we will be monitoring that everyone is participating respectfully, otherwise folks will be removed. Now, Madam Deputy City Clerk, could you please explain how the public will best be able to participate in today's meeting?
Thank you, Mayor. After each agenda item is presented, the mayor will ask the council for comments and then open it up for public comment. The Zoom host will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the mayor has called for public comment, he will announce for the public to raise their hand and if they wish to speak on a specific agenda item. If you are calling in and listening to the meeting via telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. The mayor will then call on the public who have raised their hands one by one. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and a timer will appear on the screen for the council and the public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will play voicemail public comments. If you provided a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted an email, e-comment, or recorded voice message public comment, your email, e-comment, or voice message public comment will not be duplicated, read, or played during the meeting. Additionally, there are 2 public comment periods on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters, items 13 and 17. This is the time when any person may address the council on matters not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Madam City Attorney, is there any report out from our closed session?
Yes, the council met in closed session on item 2.1 and gave direction to legal counsel. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We'll move on to item number 6. That's our proclamations and presentations today. We have one proclamation. It's for Black History Month. The recipients of this will be the Sonoma County Black Forum board members. And I've got a number of them who I think are in attendance. And Madam Vice Mayor, I believe that you will have this item if you'd like to read the proclamation, and I know you have something a little bit additional as well to read afterwards, and then we'll do public comment after that.
City of Santa Rosa Proclamation, whereas the Harvard-trained historian Carter G. Woodson, along with other members of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, established Negro History Week in February 1926 to create and popularize knowledge about the Black history, and whereas since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month, a time in which we honor the work, efforts, and achievements by Black Americans and recognize the central role of Black Americans in U.S. history. And whereas the Sonoma County Black Forum is a 100% volunteer-ran 501c3 that is committed to providing quality programming for Sonoma County youth. And whereas the Sonoma County Black Forum was created to help shape the intellectual discourse and dialogue to consider the African American experience to support local youth and the Sonoma County community by creating opportunities to train, learn, develop 21st century skills, and foster agencies in Sonoma County and the surrounding Bay Area. And whereas this group collaborated with the Sonoma State University's Black Student Union to host the 2018 African American Youth Summit, funded by the Community Advisory Board's Community Improvement Grant Program. And whereas 65 Sonoma County Black youth were in attendance and participated in a panel discussion, a college and career fair, a campus tour, workshops, and presentations on college and career readiness, financial literacy, an introduction to coding, and an opportunity to learn about historically African American Greek lettered fraternity and sororities, and leaders inspiring fruitful tomorrow, LIFT, and programs of tomorrow. And whereas the Sonoma County Black Forum has provided food to communities in need during the COVID-19 pandemic by hosting 3 food distribution events, which serve 1,165 people in Sonoma County who do not have access to traditional food safety nets, and plan to hold at least 5 food distribution events this year, along with an urban gardening series and addresses gardening in small spaces and growing fresh foods. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Chris Rogers, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, recognize the Sonoma County Black Forum and their contributions to the Santa Rosa community, and do hereby proclaim February as Black History Month. Signed by Mayor Chris Rogers today, February 23rd, 2001.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. And I think you're just going to keep going, right?
Yes. This poem was written by a youth in our community. To the boy who hates his skin, to the boy who hates his culture, to the boy who hates where he came from, to the boy who hates himself. You may not realize you do, but it shows. It shows in your preference in girls because you say you would never date a Black because they are too ghetto, and you always claim it's just your preference. But I bet you didn't realize every time you say that, your sister dies a little more inside. It shows in your interest because you believe the Europeans and their history is the only thing we learn in school because they were better anyways. And your parents hang their heads low because they know they should have taught you better. It shows in your fashion because you think chains and braids are ugly and too unprofessional. So you wear Beatles t-shirts and tight khakis. You wish so much to be like them, lighter skin, finer hair, a history to be proud of. But I want to tell you something. The fact that you are here is a miracle, and we would be proud, and you should be proud of that. Our history was not taught correctly in schools. Yes, we survived the Triangle Passage, years of slavery, messed up Jim Crow laws, brutal treatment, and harsh, unjust conditions for centuries. But even with all of the struggle, we managed to flourish and at the top of our lungs scream that oppression does not define us. There are so many phenomenal Black people that have changed history that you refuse to get to know. They stole our African culture and roots from us. So we plated our own roots and created our own culture. They stole our freedom and stole us from our land. So we fought and died for freedom in theirs. We are still oppressed and we cannot stop fighting. But I just wanted to say to the boy who hates his skin, how could you not be proud of us? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. So we will go to public comment on this. I see Ms. Woods has her hand up.
Hi, my name is Nzinga Woods. I'm one of the co-founders of Sonoma County Black Forum. We'd like to take this time to say thank you for the proclamation. We also just like to say that we accept this proclamation or this honor on the for the community members, and we stand on other communities that have served before us. We have the Black Panther Party, and we also have the NAACP that establish food programs and community programs that, again, support community in their time of need. So again, we are honored to accept this proclamation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Nzinga. Do we have anybody else who'd like to speak on this item? We've got Regina. Regina, are you able to unmute?
Okay, sorry about that.
Got a little bit of feedback there, but we can hear you.
Okay, yes, my name is Regina Brennan, and I echo everything our chair has said in Nzinga Woods. I like to let everyone know that the Sonoma County Black Forum, we are working diligently to build and sustain an engaged, inclusive, and informed Sonoma County. We absolutely appreciate the recognition that you have bestowed on us, so thank you very much.
No, thank you for being here, Regina, and thank you for everything you do. So anybody else who'd like to speak on this item? Great, I will bring it back to council. Any last thoughts from the council members? Madam Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure of getting to know and meeting many of the members of the Sonoma County Black Forum. And they are doing so much in the community, and it's such an honor to get out there and work with them. So if anyone has the opportunity to catch one of their food drives or any of the other activities that they're doing in the community, I would say do so. It's so great and wonderful to see the spirit that comes with this organization's willingness to serve our community. So.
Great, and I'd love to do that. I know other council members would as well. So hopefully we can make that happen. We'll move on to item number 7, Mr. City Manager, staff briefings.
There is no 7.1, no COVID response update this evening. So we will go to 7.2, glass fire recovery update, and I will turn it over to Paul Lowenthal, Assistant Fire Marshal.
Good evening, Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Rogers, members of the council. My name is Paul Lowenthal, Assistant Fire Marshal. We took a pause for the last couple of weeks and are here tonight on behalf of the Glass Fire Debris and Watershed Task Force, which are essentially function as a recovery team and truly a team approach over the last 5 to 6 months now. So starting off with tree removal, the Cal OES tree removal program has officially started this week. PG&E has also continued to remove their tree removal or proceeded with their tree removal activities both in the city and county. Excuse me. City staff will be meeting with the CPUC in March to review the concerns that we've brought forward on behalf of the city in regards to the PG&E practices. Also in regards to the PG&E meeting that we advised council of, that meeting has been canceled and would potentially be scheduled at a future date. For debris removal, both the private and the state debris removal processes are proceeding smoothly and at this time. If you recall, we had a number of properties that were denied by the state's debris removal program through FEMA. Basically, they were not included in the program because they essentially weren't reduced to ash. Because they had standing walls, they were not eligible for the program. So that appeal was successful that we filed with the state, and we were happy to be able to provide that good news to a number of our residents in Santa Rosa. We're down to only 2 properties that have yet to pick a program. Technically, those now fall underneath our abatement properties. And believe it or not, that's good news for the relatively small number. We're making good progress in helping them along the way and coordinating those efforts with Adam Abel out of the city attorney's office. In addition to the state's program, we currently have 16 private debris removal cleanups that have been issued, and 7 of them are already done and certified clean and ready for rebuild. Switching gears to the Skyhawk open space, staff are getting close to announcing the reopening of the area. Jeremy Gundy, our Deputy Director of Field Services, advised the task force that the erosion control measures are in place. They're finishing up repairs to both the stairs and the walking trails. The footbridge will remain closed, but with all the work that's been completed, it will allow us to open that open space back up soon. The communications team through Agent Mertens has done a tremendous job of providing updates to our fire survivors and community residents in and around the glass fire burn area. They'll be scaling back on their outreach as a lot of our issues are winding down. But the opening of the open space coming up, that'll be one of the important milestones that'll be highlighted in their next update. Jesse Oswald, our Chief Building Official representing PED, announced that our first rebuild permit was issued from the glass fire. So that was good news, an example of the service that's being provided to the glass fire survivors, similar to what was provided during the tubs. So in this case, the permit was submitted, took 4 business days to do the first review. There's a resubmittal from the design team after 6 days, a second review 4 days later, and ultimately the permit was issued in only 15 days. We have additional permits that have also been issued for a number of the properties that were damaged by the fire but not destroyed. And then finishing with the Watershed Task Force on February 17th in response to a number of inquiries we received from Oakmont residents, both regarding fire damaged and undamaged creeks. The city held a virtual meeting to support the Oakmont Firewise Committee to plan to manage their creeks for fire safety. The city provided residents of Oakmont with a panel of experts that included the fire department, transportation and public works, stormwater and creeks, as well as regulators from Fish and Wildlife, as well as the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. The focus of the meeting was what activities can be done to protect the creeks and the homes adjacent to the creeks while understanding the needs of the regulatory agencies and any permits required. It was a productive meeting and an example of our continued outreach and engagement with our community following the glass fire. And that is it for our update for this month.
Great. Council, any questions for Paul? Madam Vice Mayor?
Sorry, Mayor, that was still up.
All good. Great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Next is 7.3 Tubbs Fire Recovery Update, and Jason Nutt will be leading us off.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council members. I'm Jason Nutt. I'm the Assistant City Manager of the Operations and Transportation Portfolio. I'm the Director of Transportation and Public Works. And I'm excited to be able to provide you with a quick update about the Tubbs Fire recovery process. Following the Tubbs Fire in October of 2017, staff worked very closely with FEMA and Cal OES to develop a plan on how we will restore public infrastructure services. A week ago, I provided some information to the council relating to kind of a high-level framework or a high-level a spreadsheet that talked about all of the projects. Madam City Clerk, if you would advance slide number 2 in the presentation, please. I just wanted to kind of reinforce this for the public as well as council. This is the sphere of activities that staff has been working on since that time in 2017. There are 29 total projects that we've been undertaking, with a 30th that was added at the end, which is category Z. That's an administrative catch-up that we'll be working with finance on through the course of the event. As you can see on the column on the right-hand side, or the second one in, majority of these projects have been completed over the course of the last 3 years, with a number of other projects that are working their way through. I thought it would be most appropriate for me to pass this off to each of the project managers for them to walk you through the specifics of projects, give you status updates, talk to you about what is coming with some exciting projects. And so I want to hand it over to Eric Rauber, supervising engineer, who will walk you through the general fund oriented projects.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Rogers, and esteemed council members. My name is Eric Rauber, supervising engineer in the city's capital projects division. I'm pleased to present an overview of progress made on Tubbs Fire Rebuild general fund projects managed by our team. But first, I want to give a shout out to CIP Team 4 staff who were instrumental in bringing these projects to fruition, including project managers Danny Chen, Lisa Welsh, and Cameron McDonald, who did a great job planning, designing, and constructing these projects through what I all think we can agree were some pretty trying times. Next slide, please. On behalf of and working closely with our clients, City Streets and Parks Department staff, our team was responsible for implementing 16 general fund projects. As shown on this slide and the following slide, 9 of these 16 projects have been completed, and except for the permanent Fire Station 5 project, the remaining 6 projects are anticipated to be completed by fall 2021, with the new fire station being completed 3 years later in the fall of 2024. Next slide, please. Again, this is just an extension of the previous slide that shows the 5 remaining projects to be completed. Next slide, please. Completed projects include a temporary fire station on Parker Hill Road, replacing the Newgate Court 1 destroyed during the Tubbs fire, which has in a sense returned home. The temporary fire station was constructed on the original Fire Station 5 site prior to its fateful relocation to the new gate site. Next slide, please. The street department projects shown in this slide, including restoring street lights and excessively damaged guardrails, have likewise been completed. Next slide, please. In addition, several bridge decks were replaced on several walking bridges, including one crossing Pollen Creek on Parker Hill Road and at the Francis Nielsen Park, the latter of which required additional structural work to provide adequate support. Next slide, please. I'd now like to turn it over to Jen Santos to describe progress on the Tubbs Fire affected parks projects.
Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon. Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Rogers, council members, I'm Jen Santos, Deputy Director for Parks. We'll just walk through a couple slides really quickly to talk about an overview. For those of you that have been out to Coffee Park, it was completed October 28th last year to a very grateful and dedicated community. I think one of the biggest things here to keep in mind is this community's dedication to moving this along, keeping part of the process all along the way. We met with them all through the design process as well as construction. And the construction cost there is a little over 3.2. That was for the contract with Gelati. Next slide, please. And so we've got several tree projects going on in the city. And phase 1 was early on in the fire recovery process. And we looked at removing street trees mainly. The focus was on, hazards that might be in the right-of-way areas and adjacent to roadways. So we looked and we removed 450 fire damaged trees in the first phase. The second phase expanded to pick up trees in the medians, which are the center island landscape area in the middle of roadways, as well as some open space areas and a few parks. So we're able to grab another section of trees out there, 133. What we hope is the final phase of tree removal in the city for fire damaged trees we're still in the design process for that, but we do have a contract with an arborist, and we are hoping to have those removed from parks and open spaces, as well as city-owned parcels that aren't necessarily designated as parks, but they're open, and the trees and landscaping on them by the end of this year. Next slide, please. And so the FEMA project for 6 fire damaged parks. This project is unique in that it actually includes 6 parks. Those parks listed there: Rincon Ridge Open Space, the Neighborhood Park, Fir Ridge Neighborhood Park, Nagasawa Community Park, as well as Francis Nielsen Neighborhood Park. And if any of you have been to the Parker Hill Trail, that trail is where there's some photos that you can see some of the damages that we incurred there. But we looked at combining these parks in order to have one larger project to complete. These are all in a relatively close proximity, within a couple miles of each other. And it's talking about 100% design. We have gone through the design process. We have a few little outstanding things that we need to add to our next permit set in order to get this out to bid. But we are expecting to get this out to bid soon, and then we'll start in the construction phase of this after bidding, and we hope to complete it by spring of next year. Next slide. And so another really interesting project that we're working on is Roadway Landscaping. A lot of times these little areas get forgotten, but actually the park maintenance team does maintain these areas, and some of them are private right-of-ways as well. But essentially this recovery project picks up right-of-way areas along the roadway. Most everything that's being recovered is areas that are either right out owned by the city, or they are right away that are maintained by city park staff. And so this includes areas in Coffee Park, some of the images you're seeing there from Coffee Park, as well as the entire Fountain Grove Parkway roadway area. It's 13 miles of landscaping. So I think that I have to remember, but I think it's like 6 or 7 soccer fields that's equivalent to it. So it's a really big project, and it's a huge undertaking. And we are looking at planting 30,000 plants in the next year or two. So Collander and Associates is working on that as part of the design, and they're wrapping that up. We have worked with all the HOAs up in the Fountain Grove Parkway area, as well as the Coffee Strong in the Coffee Strong neighborhood, to get their input on the design. And we're looking forward to implementing that this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Supervising Engineer Mark from Public Works for the next part of the slideshow.
Thank you so much, Jen. Good afternoon, Mayor Rogers and Vice Mayor Rogers and members of the council. My name is Mark Casray. I'm a supervising engineer for a project that manages water enterprise projects. Like the general fund summary, this project shows completed and pending water projects related to the Tubbs fire. Many of the completed projects were in direct response to this disaster and included making emergency repairs to our storm drain infrastructure. So in the next few slides, I'll be providing additional detail for some of our larger recovery projects in progress, as well as providing some information about some of our completed recovery projects. Next slide, please. Starting with our water meter replacement project, which is currently in progress. It replaces water meters and endpoints, as well as any water meter projects that were damaged by extreme heat related to the Tubbs fire. The construction aspect of this project consists of replacing the damaged meter boxes, and this work has already been completed through a capital project in 2019. While the project is substantially complete, the official completion date will commence with final meters being set for all of the rebuilt properties. And this final step of setting meters is going to be performed by in-house staff. Next slide, please. Great. Moving on to the Skyfarm A and Hanford Quartz sewer lift station project. This is one of our ongoing projects and rebuilds 2 facilities that were destroyed by the fire, as shown on the images to the right. This project is well underway in construction, and at the Hanford Court location, the contractor is completing concrete flatwork and is preparing to install mechanical and electrical facilities. At our Skyfarm A location, the contractor is coordinating with PG&E for electrical service installation and preparing the demolition phase of this project. It's important to note, while we're currently operating these facilities with temporary pumping equipment, we are continuing to ensure that these stations meet the demands of the homes being rebuilt. Now we anticipate completion of this project at the end of this year. Next slide, please. The Tubbs fire also resulted in damages to multiple water department facilities. And the damages varied considerably between 14 different locations and consisted primarily of damaged perimeter fencing and gates, electrical enclosures, irrigation piping, and other equipment at these facilities. This project is 75% complete, and we estimate completion by fall of this year. Next slide, please. And so this final slide highlights two of our completed recovery projects. The water contamination project consisted of determining the sources of contamination, defining the solution for remediation, and then continuing to ensure that our potable water supply had no more contamination. The solution consisted of a systematic replacement of water services, meters, various appurtenances, and even some sections of water main. And the final sampling and testing was completed in October 2019, and closeout documentation has since been submitted to FEMA for reimbursements. We've also completed and submitted for reimbursement our sewer lateral plugging project. As part of the debris removal mission, contractors were to cap open sewer laterals. And this is essentially to prevent debris and rainfall infiltration from entering our wastewater system. But we found that several locations were missed, and so the city was directed by FEMA to cap these remaining locations. Construction of this project was completed in May of 2018. And with that, this concludes our briefing, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. Councilor, are there any questions? Jack.
Yeah, question about FEMA totals. This might be more for Sean or Jason or whomever, but and I know you've shown us the slide before, but I don't remember off the top of my head, how much money have we applied for reimbursement for?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Tibbetts. So far, we've applied for and received about $6 million, $6.5 million in reimbursement. Now, with that said, there are additional submittals that have occurred over the course of the last month, such as Mr. Kazray mentioned that we've submitted our paperwork for the water quality, which would be about $8.5 million back to the water enterprise at such time that Cal OES issues that payment. We also recently submitted documentation for the completion of Coffee Park and the work associated around that. Many of the road projects are just finishing up the paperwork, and those documents will be off fairly soon. As far as the total goes, I'd have to get you some documentation moving forward as far as what we think we're going to be submitting over the course of the next month or two. I don't have that material in my hands right now, and it might take just a little bit of time for us to collect.
No worries. I think, if your time allows and if the mayor permits it, I think it would be great to see at some point in the near future relating to Tubbs, just kind of a one chart snapshot on how much money we've applied for and received and how much we've applied for and haven't received. And maybe if there's an estimate of what's to come. It sounds like there's a lot of moving parts involved, but that would just be really helpful. Or even if we didn't want to do a slide on it, maybe an email. But I do want to actually say thank you to everybody that's making the city whole again. It was really awesome to see those photos of all the damage because I explicitly remember it firsthand with Chris and John and Tom and walking through those sites, seeing Parker Hill Bridge in particular for me was pretty just kind of odd because my mom used to put me in the stroller and jog with me there every morning when I was a baby. And so seeing that kind of get completed to me during this presentation really made me feel like, wow, we're becoming whole again. And it just made me deeply appreciate the amount of work that all of you are doing behind the scenes every day to make the city get back to normal. So really, my deepest thanks.
Thank you for that, council member. And I will work with finance to try to put together a document that begins to outline our progress in our reimbursement. And we'll get that out.
Thanks, Jason.
Great, thanks, Jason. I'd appreciate seeing that as well. Council, any other questions? Great. Thank you all so much for the presentation. We'll move on to item number 8. It's the city managers and city attorneys reports. Sue, let's go ahead and start with you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
I think you need public comment, not.
Yeah, you're right. We'll do public comment on item number 7, our staff briefings. If there's anybody from the public who would like to speak, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature. And I'm not seeing any. Madam City Clerk, were there any voicemail public comments? Okay.
Comment for staff briefings on COVID and community empowerment. 7 is the item number. Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Please help the community be empowered on this COVID by putting more announcements at Southwest Community Park. Put them in both English and Spanish. There's people who are there and they would benefit from having these COVID announcements and information to help them and help our community. This would also be a way for community empowerment for them to be able to spread the news to use and participate in the process of keeping our community members in Roseland as healthy as possible. Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes public comment.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, Madam City Attorney, item number 8.
Thank you. And thank you to Sean for pointing out that public comment requirement. So tonight I was going to, or this afternoon, I was going to give you a brief update on the Sonoma County COVID-19 eviction defense ordinance amendments. I did a couple weeks ago alerted you that the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors was going to be considering amendments to their eviction defense ordinance. They did take action on February 9th. And so I'm back to give you an update of what their decision was. So next slide. Before we get into the substance of the new ordinance amendments, we do have to address the early council agenda policy. As I mentioned, the Board of Supervisors took action on February 9th in adopting the amendments to its ordinance. Our preliminary agenda, however, was published about 5 days earlier on February 4th. So obviously we were not able to put the item onto the preliminary council agenda. The new county amendments do state that they are intended to apply within the city of Santa Rosa, so it does affect us directly. But as I say, the early council agenda policy precludes discussion of items that are not on the preliminary agenda unless the council finds good cause. Next slide. Good cause requires a finding by the council that as a result of exceptional circumstances beyond the control of the council, compliance with the 9-day notice requirement would impose a substantial burden on the city's ability to conduct its business or result in prejudice to a private person. You'll note I did read it as it is currently written, the policy. Of course, our new open government ordinance requires a 12 business day notice requirement. We meet neither one of those. So we will need to ask the council if it finds good cause before we get into the substance of the presentation. And it does require, with all council members present, it requires 5 affirmative votes to move forward.
Okay, great. I will, before I go for a motion from a council member, I'll take public comment on that question on whether or not to add this to the agenda. Not seeing any hands. Madam City Clerk, did we have any recorded voicemail comments?
No, we had no recorded voicemail public comments on item 8.
Great, then I'll bring it back to council. Council, is there anybody who would like to make a motion to find that there's urgency in adding this to our agenda for a discussion? Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm sorry. Are you looking for a motion to have a discussion about this? Or I guess my question is why do we need to discuss it? It sounds like the county has imposed it and we can't opt out or opt in. At least that's to the best of my knowledge. So what would be the purpose of a discussion?
So even for an informational item that came up between when we set the agenda and when we had the meeting, even an informational item like this from the city attorney, we have to add to the agenda through this process.
So to hear the city attorney's report, we need to motion and do the steps. Okay, so
Correct.
moved.
Okay. Did you have any comments, John, or were you looking to make the motion?
No, I was looking to make the motion. It's fine.
Great. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Can you confirm who had the second, please?
It was John.
Okay. Councilmember Tibbetts.
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwedhelm.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rogers.
Aye.
And Mayor Rogers.
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Great. Sue, do you want to proceed?
Yes, thank you very much. And I will proceed. We can go on to the next slide. And just to give you a sense of what the presentation is, I'm going to kind of walk through very quickly and at a high level, the different, where we started with the county ordinance, what we were then, how the state then addressed the issue of evictions during COVID, and then returned to the county ordinance amendments. And then we'll also let you know what is going on currently at the CDC, federal CDC. And at the end of it, I will be asking or offering that we can either maintain the status quo, or if the council wants to take any actions, we would come back at a later date. So to start, the county Board of Supervisors adopted its original eviction ordinance on March 24th in response to the COVID pandemic. And that ordinance prohibits residential evictions for failure to pay rent if that failure to pay rent was the result of substantial loss of income or out-of-pocket medical expenses associated with COVID. It does not relieve the tenant of the obligation to pay rent, but simply allows additional time to make that payment. And indeed, under the original ordinance, the extension for time to pay was until 60 days after expiration of the local public health emergency. Next slide. The ordinance had two primary elements. First, it created an affirmative defense, which a tenant could use in answering an unlawful detainer action, that is an action to evict. And then on the other side, it also created a private right of action where the tenant could bring a lawsuit against the landlord for any violation of the ordinance. In that case, there were damages specified in the ordinance, including a civil action for injunctive relief and also or for damages, trebled damages. All damages would be trebled that were awarded. The damages could include damages for mental or emotional distress, although those specific damages would not be trebled. The ordinance also provided for costs and attorney's fees to the prevailing party. Next slide. The original county ordinance was adopted under the county's emergency powers, which do extend throughout, those powers extend throughout the boundaries of the county. and the ordinance itself was expressly intended to apply within both the incorporated and the unincorporated areas. The ordinance also, though, did expressly state that it did not preclude additional or alternative actions by cities. Cities were free to adopt their own ordinances should they so desire. The county staff and board, though, did urge consistency throughout the county. I gave a report to the City Council on that ordinance on March 31st, 2020 of last year, and the council determined to allow the ordinance to proceed as adopted by the Board of Supervisors without change within the Santa Rosa city limits. Next slide. The county's ordinance quickly was superseded by a judicial council order that was adopted by the Judicial Council, California Judicial Council, on April 6th as its emergency order number 1. And that order imposed a statewide moratorium on all eviction proceedings except as necessary to protect public health and safety, far broader than the county's ordinance. That moratorium was initially intended to remain in effect until 90 days after the governor terminated or lifted the state of emergency. But after a number of months, the Judicial Council met and decided itself to terminate the moratorium as of September 1st, 2020. The Judicial Council indicated that the reason it was doing that was that the matter of a regulation of evictions was better left to the legislative and executive branches. And so that emergency order was terminated. Next slide. The legislature, though, did take quick actions and on August 31st adopted and the governor signed into law the Tenant, Homeowner, and Small Landlord Relief and Stabilization Act of 2020, also known as AB 3088. And AB 3088 prohibited residential evictions for non-payment of rent when that non-payment was the result of financial hardship caused by the COVID pandemic. Like the county ordinance, it includes both job loss, income loss directly related to either illness or closure of businesses, also financial hardships caused when a tenant needs to take time off of work in order to care for others. And like the county's ordinance, AB 3088 does not relieve the tenant of the obligation to pay rent, but it did provide additional time to pay. There are a number of other provisions in AB 3088, but I am trying to keep this at a high level. AB 3088 did establish 2 phases. Next slide, I'm sorry. Phase 1, if the unpaid rent had accrued during the first 6 months of the pandemic, that's from March 1st to August 31st of 2020, then the unpaid rent was converted to consumer debt and can never be used as a basis for eviction. In phase 2, if the unpaid rent accrued during the second 6 months from September 1st to January 31st, 2021, then the unpaid rent was converted to consumer debt only if the tenant submitted a declaration that the failure to pay rent was due to a financial hardship due to COVID-19, and the tenant would pay 25% of the rent due by no later than January 1st, 2021. Again, even as it's converted to consumer debt, the tenant was not relieved of the obligation. So next slide. AB 3088 authorized landlords to seek recovery of unpaid rents through small claims court, regardless of the amount of the unpaid rent, expanded the jurisdiction of the small claims court. but those lawsuits could not begin until March 1st, 2021. And AB 3088 allowed eviction for causes, other causes allowable under law, anything other than the non-payment of rent due to COVID. And the protections of the bill were originally scheduled to expire as of February 1st, 2021. Next slide. Legislature, however, did take quick action, and on January 29th, 2021, SB 91 was signed into law, and it extended the phase 2 protections through June 30th. So again, that means it prohibits eviction for non-payment of rent due to financial hardship caused by COVID pandemic, provided that this tenant submits the declaration and pays 25% of the rent due now by June 30th, 2021. Next slide. SB 91 also postponed the allowance for small claims collection actions, postponed that until August 1st, 2021. And it continued to allow for evictions for causes other than non-payment of rent due to impacts of COVID, including both at fault just cause and no fault just cause. SB 91 expressly allows for additional local eviction protections. And next slide. SB 91 also very critically established a state rental assistance program. $2.9 billion in federal rental assistance, and directed primarily into two directions. One is aid to low-income tenants that are most at risk. That is tenants specifically at or below 80% of the area median income. And then the second was aid to landlords. So if a property owner would agree to waive 20% of the unpaid rent, then the property owner was eligible for reimbursements of the remaining 80% of the rent due between April 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2021. Next slide. In light of SB 91's specific allowance for stronger protections against evictions at local agencies, the County Board of Supervisors considered a couple of different versions of amendments to strengthen eviction protections. And they did adopt their second urgency ordinance on February 9th, adding the additional protections to Ordinance 6301. The board focused on the impacts of COVID and found that the housing displacement and evictions during public health emergency would hinder individuals from complying with the state and local directives to shelter in place and would lead to the increased spread of COVID-19, overburdening our healthcare system and potentially resulting in loss of life. Next slide. Excuse me. So the new amendments to the county ordinance prohibit all evictions except in three categories. First, when necessary due to violence, threats of violence, or when a tenant poses an imminent threat to the health or safety of another. It specifically notes that the threat to health and safety cannot be the tenant's COVID-19 illness or exposure. Second category is eviction can move forward if it is for the purpose of immediately removing the unit from the rental market in compliance with state law. There is a third category, excuse me, that is a little bit cryptic in the ordinance, but what it provides is that evictions can move forward if they are based upon non-payment of rent between March 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2021, if that non-payment of rent was unrelated to financial hardships resulting from COVID-19. And that is based on the requirements of state law. Next slide. All of the other provisions of Ordinance 6301 remain unchanged. and it remains expressly intended to apply in both incorporated and unincorporated areas. And as the original ordinance, it is self-executing, so there is no further action required by cities. The ordinance itself creates private rights of action, so there's nothing that needs to be done by the city. The ordinance, however, does not preclude additional or alternative action by the cities, so the council is free to consider whether it wants to take any different action than what the Ordinance 6301 as amended now provides. And before we go to the last slide, which is simply for questions and comments, I do want to note that the federal CDC has issued an order which is also in place during much of this time. They provided a temporary halt in residential evictions and very specifically directed at health concerns of COVID-19. It has slightly stricter standards in who's eligible for those protections. Requires that the individual sign a declaration under penalty of perjury that they've used their best efforts to obtain government assistance, that they have an income less than $99,000 a year, that they're unable to pay rent due to loss of income or medical expenses from COVID, that they're using their best efforts to pay as much as they can, and that eviction would render them either homeless or would force them into a congregate or shared living situation. Again, the CDC's order, it's a lengthy order, and it's very strongly focused on preventing the spread of COVID. It also doesn't relieve the tenant of obligation to pay the rent. It also allows charging of fees, penalties, and interests. It allows evictions for some other purposes, on some other grounds, and it does have very substantial fines attached to it. It had been set to expire on December 31st, but it has been extended to March 31st, 2021. The order, though, specifically, this is the CDC's order that the federal level specifically does not apply to any state or local jurisdiction that has a moratorium on residential evictions that provides the same or greater level of public health protection. Certainly, the county's ordinance now provides a greater level of public health protection, and I would make the very strong argument that the state restrictions also provide stronger protections, and so the CDC order would not apply within the state. The state restrictions, there's some areas where the CDC is stricter, but I think overall the state's protections are stronger, or at least as strong as CDC. So now we can go to the last slide, which is if you have any questions or comments. And I will note that there have been some questions about what other tenant protections are currently in place, and happy to answer those if you would like. That's it.
All right, thank you so much, Sue. We'll start with Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse for landlords, here we have it. So Sue, this is intended to apply to all the cities, although the county didn't ask us what we thought about their additional language in their ordinance. We have no way of opting out of this. Is that true? This extra language?
You can. The council can opt out by adopting an alternative ordinance. Your alternative ordinance could go back to the original county terms. It could be something different. You are free to take separate action should you so desire.
The original 6301.
Right.
Okay, so this, let me give you what my concerns are. What this does, except under an issue under health and safety, takes the contracts between the tenant and the landlord, and in some cases rips them up. As far as I can tell, in this case, if there was if the landlord said you could not sublet a room in your home that you were renting, and that sublet did not threat health or safety, that part of their contract they would not have to adhere to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if someone was renting a home and there was a non-load bearing wall, and it was a 4-bedroom home and they wanted to make it 3 bedrooms, with one of those rooms being large, and they wanted to rip out one of those walls, and that wall did not create an issue with health and safety of the tenants, they could do that, and they could do that without fear of being evicted. Is that the case?
Yes, if it does not cause, you would still be able, in terms of the tenant taking a load-bearing wall out, yes, you would be able to take other actions against the tenant for that action, but you would not be able to evict them for that action.
Right, and if they said you couldn't have pets and you decided to have 2 or 3 cats, they could do that without fear of being evicted. Is that the case?
That's true. Again, there would be other actions that you could take. You could go to court to enforce the terms of your lease, but you would not be able to evict them.
Okay. So in many cases, those restrictions that would be placed on a tenant would be removed if we were to embrace the new 6301, unless there was specific issue around health and safety. That tenant could in some cases be given free range to basically ignore the terms of at least part of their rental agreement. Is that the case?
Again, you would have other remedies, monetary remedies against the tenant. You would be able to go to court to seek an injunction against the actions that they're taking, any monetary damages, but you would not be able to evict them.
Okay. So I have to ask, it's something that the county certainly didn't ask us, but I have to ask myself and I have to ask my colleagues, is this good for Santa Rosa? I mean, we have been working very, very hard to encourage housing in all types in our downtown and elsewhere, but mainly in the core of our city. And if I was a person coming to Santa Rosa and looking to build rental housing, and this was in place, I think I would be looking elsewhere. And I think it is pushing us backward in our endeavors. I think that the original, the pieces of, or 6301 in its original form was already above and beyond what I thought was necessary. And we haven't had, as far as I can tell, depending on who you ask, 6301 has been fairly successful. Why the county decided to open up this door and get in the way of contracts between tenants and landlords, and allow tenants to basically ignore certain elements in their contract, unless after they do it they get sued. And we can all see that that's probably not going to be happening. I think it's putting an unnecessary burden on the tenants. I don't think it's good for Santa Rosa. I don't think it's good for our downtown and the future of the downtown as it looks for rental housing in no matter where you're putting it in Santa Rosa. And I think that it would be, I don't understand why the county thought there was something broken. And I don't like the idea of them telling us what to do and how to make Santa Rosa better. I don't think that in my opinion, I don't believe the tenants require this kind of protection. And I think that the protections afforded by the state and afforded by the original 6301 is enough. And I am very concerned about where this would take Santa Rosa if we decided to embrace this language. I'm disappointed that the county decided to go forward without any kind of conversation, as far as I know, with any kind of reaching out to the cities before they imposed this further draconian measure on landlords. And I'm very fearful of the fallout, the future fallout for the city of Santa Rosa. I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Eddie?
Well, first of all, I do want to echo the concerns of Councilman Sawyer in regards to the contractual obligations and understanding between landlord and tenant. And I do have a question. I see that the small claims collection action is postponed until August 1st, 2021. Is there any other way for us to know how many tenants have applied for the hardships without any litigation having begun?
I don't have that data here today, and I would guess that there are few that were asserted under the county ordinance. I don't know about under the state law, same idea of filing the declaration. And I don't know whether the state has collected that information or if any of the, the apartment association or any other tenant associations have collected any of that data. But I can sure check and see if we can track down any numbers, give us a sense of how often these are being invoked.
Yeah, the reason that I asked the question is I remember receiving an email with how many homes were suffering hardships, and that's what actually brought up the question of how many of those homes had sought the hardship or present the hardship to the landlord. Thank you.
Sure, and that information very well may be out there, but I'm just not familiar with it right now, but I can sure check and pass along whatever I find out.
Okay, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you. So I'm curious to know, going back to Councilmember Sawyer's concerns, which sound plausible, and I'm sure we could find cases of them, if we have had widespread or even instances of this type of thing. I know we have some landlords on our council, and perhaps Sue could speak to this, but typically in these situations, I get bombarded with emails from landlords and from NORBAR and from CAA, and I haven't heard a peep. So I'm wondering, where the landlord community stands on this before we take a stand, because I know that I've heard from tenants who are really struggling. And while I echo the concern that we don't want to dissuade anybody from providing rental property in Santa Rosa, at the same time, are the concerns expressed prevalent? Are people tearing down walls and moving in, harems of cats or dogs or reptiles or other furry friends?
Sure, and I don't have that information, and I will note that up until this amendment on February 9th, both the local and the state and the federal all were prohibiting evictions based on failure to pay rent due to the financial hardships caused by COVID-19. So we were not in the world of, except for that brief period of time when the Judicial Council order was in place. So from April to August, where all evictions were halted. So other than for health and safety. So these amendments would almost take us back to that, although it also allows evictions for removing the unit from the market or for failure to pay rent for reasons other than COVID. So I don't know if we have any data that comes from that time when the Judicial Council order was in place. That might be the most relevant. But this new ordinance has only been in effect since February 9th. So I don't know that there's any data gathered on that point. I will also note that the ordinance it does have a term. It's not a permanent ordinance. It's an urgency ordinance. It is intended to remain in effect until 60 days after the public health emergency orders are no longer in effect. There are some legal hurdles related to that term, but at this point, that is what the ordinance provides. So again, I'm happy to try to get additional data on what's actually happening out there in the world. But in terms of this particular ordinance, it's been in effect for such a short period of time. I don't know that we'll have much data.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thanks, Mayor. Sue, I got a lot of questions and a few comments. We did a price gouging ordinance going all the way back to Tubbs Fire, and I believe it was no increases above 10%, correct? And that's still in effect?
We have our own local price gouging ordinance has expired. It expired more than a year ago, but the state price gouging law, which does provide for that 10% cap on raises during so long as it's in effect. And it has the governor has recently extended those protections to March 25th of 21. So those are still in place, enforced by the district attorney. She has a very strong program in her office for that. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Do we have a list, or I don't want to delve into it tonight, I don't think, unless the mayor wants to and the council wants to, and we're going to have a discussion about opt-in, opt-out. Before we would decide to opt out, I would want to know, the scenarios where the first iteration of 6301 was different from the current. And I know that John laid out a couple of good examples. Where I'm coming from with this is I am a huge believer in tenant protections when it comes to crises. And unfortunately, this community has gone through years of crises, which is causing problems. John's correct. I am going to throw out an example. Somebody I'm very close to in the community has a 3-bed, 2-bath condominium. It's 1,500 square feet. She's owned it for 20 years. She rented it out for $2,000 a month. And then when COVID-19, when the fire started and that price gouging ordinance came into effect, she thought, well, I'm going to ride it out. And now with the second iteration of 6301, she's put it on the market efficiently, and she's taking it off the rental market because that money in her account in a mutual fund is going to make more money than the rent now. And I think John's right. I think that if this continues, we're going to see that happening a lot. It's just a function for an investor where the money's going to make money. They'll take it out of rental housing and put it into other investments if they perform better. And that's the balance that we as a government body, if we're going to be dealing in tenant protection laws, we have to be really cognizant of what that balance is and make sure that those scales don't tip so far to the side that we do lose our rental housing market. And that's going to be compounded by the fact that VRBOs and Airbnbs are lucrative enterprises outside of rental tenant protection laws as well. So it's not as if every home sold is going to go to at an affordable price to some family who's looking to buy it. And God knows it's not affordable when they sell it now, because they sell for upwards of $500,000 for anything remotely small in this community anymore. So we do need to be careful with our housing. John, I second that completely. I would be in favor of going just, again, without looking at the side-by-side comparisons, because I'd like to know what the county's thinking was. I guess I can go back and watch the board meeting to figure it out. But I'm kind of like John. I don't see how the expansion of regulations under the second iteration of 6301 actually adds more protections than the first iteration did. So I would be okay with going back to that with a good analysis. But what I would really want to have a discussion about, and I really want to have a discussion about anyways, if not today, at some point in there, is what are we going to do with the people who are in this community who are above the 80% AMI threshold, who will be ineligible for, I think it's Senate Bill 91, financial support for the agreements that landlords make. If they accept 80% of rent, or probably getting the ratio wrong now, but 80% of rent, and then the state backfills someone less than 80. I think we're going to see a lot of people in this community who are just above the 80% threshold, who need that financial support, that aren't going to be eligible. And, you know, we've brought this up before at council about PG&E funds. This is honestly one of the last things I'd want to see our PG&E money go towards, because talk about kind of it being flash in the pan money. But, you know, this is a crisis. I think it is going to be a crisis for people over 80% AMI. And, you know, I couldn't think of a better way to spend some disaster money than to prevent a second disaster. And watching those folks slip into a state of homelessness is going to be a second disaster. And I would also rather see us look at that kind of a compromise as opposed to extending an ordinance beyond what the county has already done, or extending an ordinance beyond the timeline of what the county's already done. In my opinion, at some point, this community has to get back to normal. Normal is not now, in my opinion, but so we got to look out for people who aren't making money right now. That's for darn sure. But I am worried about the rental stock in the community and what folks are doing with their investments right now.
Are there any other questions? All right, we're going to go to public comment first, and then I'm going to bring it back for a little bit more discussion, council. So if you're just joining us and if you're interested in participating in live public comment, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on Zoom. All right, I'm not seeing any. Do we have any recorded voicemail comments?
We don't have any recorded voicemail public comment for this item.
Okay, great. We'll bring it back to council then for some form of direction for staff. So Sue, as I understand it, the touch point that you're looking for is, does the council want to have a discussion about doing something different? And it doesn't necessarily need to include what that something different is. It's whether or not we want to do presumably a study session to give direction on what we would like to see, or we say, we're good where we're at right now, leave it alone for now. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll go around the horn then. I'll start with Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I would, although I think that 6301, even as it stands, is not something I'm altogether pleased about. I certainly would not want to increase the negative environment in which landlords and tenants may be placed in by making it even more restrictive. So I would be looking for status quo.
Okay, Councilmember Fleming.
I think that we ought to get some more information, especially on how the Board of Supervisors arrived here. So I'm in favor of a study session to gather information from the landlord and tenant communities and make a decision from there.
Okay, Councilmember Sweathelm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I really feel like we're in the dark here, and the fact that we have the lack of public comment on this issue is surprising to me. I really am supportive. I like Mr. Tibbetts' idea. Let's see 6301 compared to what it was before and what it is now. I'm just not comfortable jumping on board with what the county has done, because I have no idea what led them to go in that direction.
Okay, Councilmember Alvarez.
I agree with all the comments made thus far. I believe that we have an opportunity to possibly pick up where maybe the supervisors left off or might have missed. And this is an opportunity for us to avoid adding to the homeless issue, or at least depleting the funds of the tenants as well as the landlords. So I think it merits a study session. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Tibbetts.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the study session. The only request I would make to staff who's going to generate it, if they could try to obtain numbers on what the need is out there. I know many of us probably read that article in the Press Democrat by Guy Kovner that said 36 million in unpaid rents in the county of Sonoma. trying to dig into that number a little bit deeper would be phenomenal in terms of, okay, of that 36 million, how much of that is up to 80% of AMI? How much of that is above 80% AMI? And then I'm going to go so far as to say, once we find out what that delta is above 80, we should really engage in a conversation with our county partners to try to figure out if there's an opportunity to provide supports to families that are going to be facing eviction once Senate Bill 91 ends, and when I'm hearing the county is going to end 6301, when that kind of hits simultaneously. I think we need to get ahead of what could be a pretty big wave out there.
Okay, Madam Vice Mayor.
I'm in favor of the study session to answer a lot of the questions that were posed, and also to hear from both sides of the community about why they feel like it's important.
Okay, it sounds like we've got pretty clear direction from the council. So I'll work with the city manager and city attorney and get that study session scheduled as we can to bring it back. Does that work for council? Excellent. All right, thanks, Sue, for your presentation. Sean, did you have anything for city manager's report?
Nothing to report.
Okay. We'll move on then to any statements of abstention by council members. I'm seeing nobody raise their hands. Okay. Are there any mayors and council member reports for today's meeting? Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of appointments to make. I'm appointing John McHugh to the Design Review Board to replace Scott Kincaid, who I just want to give a thanks to, served for a really long time to the city. I will miss him. I will be appointing Stephen Gale as John McHugh's replacement to the Cultural Heritage Board, Akash Kalia to the Planning Commission, and Chris Grable to the Board of Public Utilities. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Fleming.
I wanted to note that this Wednesday at 1 p.m. we have the Renewal Enterprise District meeting. It will be our first meeting after the council and the Board of Supervisors have both agreed to allocate money, the settlement money, to that board to start a housing fund. It'll also be our changeover meeting. So for anybody who is really excited to find out who will be our next chair, I encourage you to tune in at 1 p.m. on Monday for more government fun.
Thank you. Thank you for your service, Councilmember Alvarez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to announce that I'm going to reappoint Vicki Duggan to our Planning Commission. And I also want to announce that I am appointing Shantavi Toledo to our at-large CAP membership. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember. And just a really quick report from me, and we touched on it very briefly in our goal setting last week, but Councilmember Sawyer and I and the city manager and city attorney and a bunch of other critical staff from the city did meet with county representatives to begin the discussions around a downtown or county complex center for the county or broader partnerships. That is now being left to a couple of discussions between staff, and then this group will get back together again to see what the progress looks like. And I'll be keeping the council in the loop as we move forward. We'll go on. We have no minutes today for item number 11. Mr. City Manager, do you want to do item 12, the consent items?
Sure. Item 12.1, motion contract award, battery backup retrofit at various traffic signals. Item 12.2, resolution professional services agreement with Collander Associates Landscape Architecture Incorporated to provide a system-wide parks condition assessment, deferred maintenance analysis, and project prioritization for the city's park system. Item 12.3, resolution professional service agreement with David L. Gates and Associates Incorporated, a California corporation, to provide landscape architectural design and engineering services to prepare construction documents for Finley Community Park, Aquatics Playground, picnic area, and landscaping. Item 12.4, resolution bid award general services agreement number F002232 with Neil Robert Lundy Jr., DBA Zero Turn Power Washing. Item 12.5, resolution, Second Amendment to General Services Agreement with F001630 with Scott's PPE Recon Incorporated.
Excellent. Council members, are there any questions on the consent calendar? Councilmember Sweathelm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions on item 12.2.
Can I ask Tim Bernard and Jen Santos to be promoted?
So my two questions are, the first one, is noticing other, on the consent calendar, we saw who the competitors were and how much they were bidding for each of the different contracts. This one, I noticed that there were 3 proposals, no dollar amounts other than what the one that was chosen, the $247K. So can we get some information as to what were the other bids, and was there a budget established for this activity?
Good evening, Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Rogers, and council members. My name is Emily Ander. I'm a park planner assistant with the Parks Division. There were 3, as you mentioned, there were 3 proposals received, one from Collander Associates, one from Integra, and one from Veritas. And Callander's fee was the lowest of the 3. And the range, I'll have to get back with you on the exact range of the other 2 proposals.
That would be helpful if you could just send that to us. And then it's also related to financing. Since I know we had our first year of Measure M funding, because I think it started April 1st of 2019 through April 1st of 2020, how much did the city receive from that Measure M funding? And I know we were anticipated to receive 1.9. I don't recall if we've been told how much we did receive.
We can get back to you on that, council member. That's not on this particular item, but we will absolutely report that back to you.
And the reason I'm asking is tied into 246K. I don't know if we're getting a good deal or what are some other possibilities for that. And then reading the plan for that, they talked about forming a technical advisory committee. Who actually will be making that decision? And what other members, what is going to be the composition of that technical advisory committee that's going to be making comments and advising this group?
We have a project kickoff meeting scheduled for next Tuesday morning with the design team and parks staff currently, and we will talk about the composition of the TAC, but it would include facilities and facilities design, engineering, and recreation staff, as well as parks maintenance staff and park planning staff.
So this is a continuation of the process we began in doing an assessment of all of our existing assets. We've done the buildings, we've done other campuses. This is actually the parkland assessment portion of this conversation. So it's not going to take into consideration buildings which have already been assessed. This was the general conditions of playing fields, areas like that, that were outside of that initial scope when we did that assessment. So we're catching up on the internal assessment and finishing out the asset assessment so that we get a complete picture in those areas.
I understand. I really appreciate the intent. The report also said that members of the public, community advisory board, and I'm not clear based on the punctuation if council is going to be involved in that. I'm just looking for opportunities for council to have a more voice in that. So we're hearing the process as we move along versus now all of a sudden it's an item before the council and we have questions that maybe could have been answered if we've been involved in the process early on. So that's why I was asking who actually makes those decisions, because the contract and the staff report, I wasn't really clear on that.
So it's going to be a staff-based process. We're happy to schedule sessions with council members to get that input moving forward, but it was following a similar process that we had done with other assessments that we had we had previously embarked upon. This was closing the loop on one area that had not been assessed for deferred maintenance and condition.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, Council? Councilmember Schwedhelm, did you want to pull this off of consent, or are you comfortable leaving it on?
No, I just want to have the conversation. Those are the questions. Let's move forward. My main thing is what just what I said, getting the council involvement so there's no surprises moving down the road. For on the ground floor of the maintenance, as some recent council conversation regarding parks, I think it'd be helpful for us to be engaged earlier rather than later.
All right, Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Would it be possible to get a list sent out to the council on there's a map of the parks. I'm in the staff report. Hold on just one second. In the presentation, there's a map, but there's not a list, and I can understand why there's not just a list of the various parks names. Luther Burbank Home and Gardens is entitled a park. The buildings were analyzed for their condition. Is there any work to be done on the grounds as far as an analysis of the condition? Will there be work done on the grounds of Burbank Gardens that do not contain the rest of the site does not contain buildings? So will that be analyzed? Is that
yes,
part
it
of
will.
the group? Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go to public comment on this item. Is there any public comment for the consent calendar? All right, are there any voicemail public comments?
There's one.
Consent items number 12. Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Today you'll decide to give money to an outside consultant talking about the park's priorities. It's important to actually find out from the community, those that use the parks, what are a priority for them for the next steps on the parks. Just going with staff often leaves out some of the things that the community members feel are very important. This is vital at this point in time because the parks are being used by many people who in the past hadn't been coming to parks. They're there now due to COVID. Southwest Community Park for Roseland, one of the busiest parks around, definitely needs more playing fields, more land area, and yet I bet staff will only say, oh, we need to put in more pavement. Actually, that's not the case. And you don't need to change the pavement that you have there. You need to find ways to make the parks more inviting to the users, and it's not about putting down more asphalt or concrete.
That concludes public comment on item 12.
Great. I'll bring it back to the council. Madam Vice Mayor.
I move items 12.1 through 12.5 and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
So I heard a motion from the Vice Mayor, second from Councilmember Tibbetts. Madam City Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Alvarez?
Yes.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Tibbetts?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
And Mayor Rogers.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor. That passed unanimously.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our next item. That's item number 13. It's public comment for non-agenda items. If you are interested in talking to the council about something that is not on today's agenda, go ahead and raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes to talk. Under the Brown Act, council members can't get into a back and forth since it hasn't been agendized, but we can try to address things afterwards if we can. So I see first is Academic Senate.
Hello, sorry, I thought it was on my personal Zoom. My name is Amanda Hopkins, and I am a resident of District 3 at 9th Street and Davis Street. You can all hear me, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I live directly across from the 9th Street overpass, and I just want to raise concerns about the health and safety of our community here. There are serious risks to health, safety, and emotional well-being of the residents here in our neighborhood because of the homeless encampment under the 9th Street overpass. As someone with family members who have experienced homelessness, I empathize with the homeless and mentally ill. I support folks receiving housing and services, but allowing an encampment of individuals with serious mental illness and substance abuse issues sustains an ecosystem which supports crime and substance abuse. I hear shouts and screams daily. I witness drug deals and fights. And last year, a homeless couple got into a fight and a large boulder was thrown through our living room window. So you can see that this has become a major safety issue. The neighborhood that I'm living in, on one side of the overpass, we have a high school. On the other side of the overpass, there is an elementary school. So this is also a school district. And so I just want to say that I know that there are open shelter beds available, but I've been told that because of COVID-19, homeless people cannot be taken to those shelters. And I'm just wondering why rapid testing is not available. And I'm also wondering, since we are in a residential district and a neighborhood which is very close to an elementary school and a high school, why this encampment has been allowed to stay here. So I'm just wondering if this can be addressed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. As I mentioned, we can't get into non-agenda items tonight, but I do know that staff is working on it, so perhaps we can get an update out to the community as well. Do you have anybody else who is interested in speaking on non-agenda items? All right, Madam City Clerk, did we have any voicemail comments?
We have one voicemail public comment.
Okay.
Public comment on non-agenda items. Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Nice. Nice that you folks have been able to step up and help the community by saving a significant portion of the PG&E settlement money. While saving all of it could have perhaps helped more in the long term by saving a large portion. You have helped for the next time we have a fire emergency or floods or downturns, which could be sooner than we expect. Also, thank you kindly for putting aside money for a Roseland library in the future, if possible. Please take the effort to codify that and make sure that it's written into perhaps a trust where the $10 million is put aside to draw interest while waiting for the project in the future. With that in mind, also draw up stipulations, covenants that says that money can't be taken for anything else, that the money and any of the interest earned would go 100% for the Roseland Library. Due to unforeseen circumstances in the future, a different council or different staff members may try to siphon money off from that. We don't know if the city manager or the city attorneys will still be here, the people that wrote this up. Council members change, so priorities may change. Please protect that money now that you've made the effort try to help the Roseland community with the Roseland Library branch. The utmost care needs to be taken to protect all the funds with a really good, well-written document that points out it can only be used for that Roseland Library and cannot be siphoned off and used elsewhere in the future. Thank you kindly, and all the best to you again for your nice work on trying to help Roseland with this positive addition. Bye now.
Okay, so that will conclude our public comment. Council, we have no other items tonight, no study sessions, no public hearings. So we will go ahead and adjourn. I'll see you all next week.